I was going to say, I need the clicker though.
Yes.
So maybe a little bit of background about me personally. So sorry, I have to speak in English because I'm from the U.S. and you won't like my German, trust me. If I talk too fast, please just raise your hand, ask me to slow down. That's usually not a problem, but if it is a problem, please just ask me to slow down. So a little background. So as I said, I'm in the U.S. I run part of our IT organization, so we kind of split the organization between some of our digital initiatives that we're dealing with and also some of what you might call traditional IT. It doesn't mean we have two organizations. It's one IT group within ANDRITZ. We just kind of split responsibilities and duties a little bit. So that's just kind of, and I have a long history with some combination of ANDRITZ companies. So we were acquired, as I think some of you probably know, ANDRITZ acquires a lot of companies. He said something about the 80s, so it'll be close to 30 years with some combination of ANDRITZ companies. So I have a lot of insight, especially from the IT side, if you want to say. I grew up with ANDRITZ in the IT world. So as Damo said, we started this kind of, I'll say a POC, but really I think it was more than a POC, the Nagarro sort of thing, thinking breakthroughs. So we had numerous sessions, mostly held in Delhi, where we kind of talked through some of this stuff. And then out of this, we picked some different topics and different projects. So I kind of like to take you on that journey of where did it start, where are we today, what lessons did we learn, which I think is probably the biggest takeaway, hopefully, for at least the majority of you sitting in here. I always find it interesting not to hear people speak because they always tell you the good things. I also, at least in my world, like to understand the bad things because those are the things that I would like to avoid if we're doing the next project and stuff like that. So I'll also touch on that. Okay, I was going to say, I broke it already, but so when we were thinking of a name, because, as Damo said, data is growing and growing and growing, and one of the biggest things is how do you manage that data? And, the key word is data lake, and ultimately, none of us want to create the data swamp where we're just dumping and dumping and dumping and not knowing what to do with it. So that was kind of the catchphrase of the talk. So I'll talk through a few items and maybe just one other disclaimer before I start. So I'm not going to read slides. So I'm going to tell you my story, so to speak. It will match the slides, or at least hopefully I match the slides, but you might find content on the slides that I'm going to tell you, and you might find stuff I'm going to tell you that's not on the slides. So I'll give you that disclaimer before I start. But I will touch on all of these. So again, how did we start? What was the hackathon that we did in relationship with Nagarro? 2 data lake projects that we did, the lessons learned, and like I said, to me this is the key. And then also kind of what's our thought process going forward. So as I said, we started with this sort of thinking breakthroughs mentality where we had different sessions. All of these pictures are in the offices in India, I believe. I think they all are. And basically, we created a whole bunch of different topics that we thought had potential. Then we ranked those topics and we said, okay, is AI a topic? Is IoT a topic? Are we doing some of this in other areas? For example, in our automation department, we already are doing a bunch of IoT stuff, so do we really need to enhance that, or do we just need to support that? Meaning, are they handling the security aspect correctly? So we thought about it that way, and ultimately we said, look, ANDRITZ continues to buy companies. We have lots of data, structured and unstructured data, and can we make better use of this data? Can we gain more visibility? So this was kind of one of the main topics. But we had a whole list of other topics that we either are exploring, have explored, and kind of where are we going. And if you haven't done this, I would be a big advocate to at least consider doing something like this, because I'm a firm believer that you can create a whole big list of many topics and do nothing well, or you can really prioritize and select your 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever the number is and really focus and get some value out of those. So just to kind of continue, so again, we selected this sort of data lake as a topic, not really knowing what that meant. So we started with sort of this marketing campaign, or I don't know, someone from Nagarro might be able to help me with a better word, but basically we challenged the team in what we originally were calling a hackathon, and then we changed it to a datathon. And we gave them some data that we said, we want you to take this data and make sense of it. Gave them some guidelines, but not much more than that. It was on purchasing, and we wanted to see, are we purchasing the same part, say, in Asia that we're purchasing in the Americas and purchasing somewhere else? Different lead times, different pricing. So you name it, it was kind of, here's the data, you make sense of it, kind of challenge. And they formed different teams. We had a jury that was Nagarro experts that kind of weighted the results. They presented the top 3, I believe it was. Results, we did a little bit more digging, and ultimately this datathon drove the ultimate data lake topic. So based on this initial project, or this initial sort of marketing campaign, or whatever you want to call it, this brought us to, okay, we need to go forward with a data lake, because we got some results that we said, okay, we want to explore further. So this was kind of the starting point. This was the team. So again, the team that started, and then the winning team, or teams. I think this is actually two teams in this picture. But again, it was all done. We talked to the team at Nagarro. We said, this is what we want to do. This is the data set we want to give you. They did all the internal marketing. They got the teams assembled, or the teams were self-formed. And then we gave prizes to first, second, and third. And then, like I said, we went from there. So what did we do? We had a certain set of criteria where we wanted to look. And I'm sure if you haven't experienced this, I can pretty much say you will experience this. There's a lot of territorial battles, and Damos mentioned it. You know, what's a data warehouse? What's our business intelligence reporting? What's our whatever the topic is? So we also use Celonis for process mining of data. So there's a lot of pieces in the sort of data manipulation, or data, I don't even know the right word, data visualization, let's call it that. This was actually something that I came across that I thought was actually pretty good, because I think it gives you a good comparison of who's using what data. So whether it's a data warehouse, whether it's BI related tools, whatever, you have certain use cases, and then Data Lake, I think, has another use case. All these slides, I guess, will be also available. I mean, I see some of you taking pictures, which is fine, but I'm just saying all of these slides that are presenting, at least the slides that I'm presenting, will be available, but you can take pictures. I'm just letting you know. Oh, okay. That's usually not the case, that people want to take pictures of me, but if you do, I'll be available after for one-on-one pictures. But that's usually not the case. So again, I think this is a good slide. I think you maybe can also use it within your organizations, because I think the question always is, well, we already have this, why do we need that? Or what are we doing with this when we already have that? So I think this will help, at least hopefully, give you some sort of what I always call, we need the guardrails. We need to, if you're driving on the motorway and there's 3 lanes, no one tells you which lane to go in, but they do tell you stay within the motorway, unless you're in India, and then sometimes it's a little bit different, but that's another topic. So this is, I think this slide might be interesting. So this slide here, I have to give you a little bit of a history on sort of the framework. So ANDRITZ is working on a platform called Metris, and this is sort of the branding of that. So it's in here, but it's not really related specifically to this project. It's more related to what are we doing from a standpoint of digitalization and data for customers. But it somewhat ties to this, because part of the data lake projects that we did was not only to see what we could do, but it was also to see what the potential was when it comes to customer data. And we were talking briefly, I don't see them in here now, but we were talking briefly with the autonomous car demo. So there's certain decisions you need to make, within seconds or milliseconds that, if I'm walking out on the street, I don't want that car to hit me. It better be able to decide that right then and there. There's other data as far as, what the boundaries are of the road, or there's a tree in this, whatever. That can certainly be stored and then acted on. So it's the same for us. We have customers that are running equipment, more and more sensors. They need to be able to make decisions at that, second or milliseconds to say, do I need to open this valve, shut this valve, whatever. So all of those topics. But there's other stuff, especially around optimization topics, that can go over a period of months or years or whatever, where you want to look at it, you want to be able to analyze it. So the whole idea was that right now a lot of this stuff is on premise. The IT OT world, for those that understand that terminology. So in most cases, the OT world has always been secured based on segmentation. Don't expose it, and secure that environment so that people can't attack it, or you reduce your risk exposure. Well, in order to use any of this data, this massive amount of data, and I don't know the number that he quoted, 20 terabytes or petabytes or whatever bytes, you're going to need that data somewhere. We're not going to have that processing power at the edge, or say on local file servers or storage systems or whatever. So you're going to need to leverage the cloud. So part of this idea was also to gain some insight on what can we do, what skills do we lack, and ultimately how can we take this and expand what we can also offer to our customers. So it wasn't exactly a part of the criteria of these topics, but it was definitely one of the things that we wanted to drive to also see what expertise do we have in-house, what do we not, what's the potential, how can we scale it, and I'll go through some of this in more detail. But so that's sort of this slide. So when you see these slides, it's really towards the Metris thing, meaning this branding of this slide. So it's still ANDRITZ, but it's a little bit different than the other slides. So we selected two different use cases. One was GIT is Group IT, so that's our global IT organization. We had a bunch of Excel-based budgets, costing tools, and whatever, primarily Excel, maybe some data from SAP. And then the other one was procurement. As I said, this was also start of the use case of the Datathon, and then we just took this forward into this data lake. Sorry, I just need to do a quick time check to stay on time. So this was some of the things that we looked at. We tried to figure out where are we. We tried to, as I said, talk about how can we leverage data lake for future customer projects and stuff like that. So these were the two use cases. I'll go through a little bit more of kind of what we were looking for. And you can also see we started in June of 2018. Lessons learned, I'll also tell you sort of some of the scheduling conflicts we had there, or some of the challenges we had, but this is kind of when this all started. We had a couple of technical criteria that we wanted to make sure that we had confirmed and to see. So some of this was, we had data coming from different sources. So as I said, we had Excel, we had SAP, BI, BW data that was already kind of in the warehouse, so to speak, and then we had traditional SAP ECC data. So we took data from different sources. Again, we wanted to test how easy is it going to be, how difficult is it going to be, structured data, unstructured data, all sorts of different topics. So we tried a bunch of different things. We used an on-premise gateway, I speak English and I can't even say it. Authentication was a topic. So we were, if you look at ANDRITZ, we're a fairly, decent sized organization, but we still run as very small independent companies. So we have many different legal entities around the world. We share some stuff across legal entities, other stuff we don't. So we have a pretty detailed authorization concept, and in SAP and other. And the question was, how do we bring that forward? Because we don't want to take data that we have secured in one environment, move it to another environment, and then lose all the roles and rights and all of that stuff. So that was also a topic that we wanted to at least consider. Whether we had it perfectly working and perfectly figured out, that was not the goal, but at least to understand what's the limitations, what do we need to consider as we move forward. So this was also one of the cases. We also wanted to see how long does it take. So we have a lot of data. What's the load time? And it's not only what's the initial load time, but what's the delta load time? So if I load data today, I don't want to have to go back and load the past 3 years again. I only want to load the data from today to tomorrow or whenever I do the next data load. So we wanted to make sure we checked not only the performance, but also the data load times. And you can see we loaded 14 years of data from different sources. Primarily, this was direct SAP data. Some legal entities or some what we call company codes in SAP, it was very easy. They didn't have a lot of data. Other locations, like, for example, the headquarters in Graz, it was much more difficult. There was a lot of data, a lot of transactional type data that took a while. So again, we had different use cases. We wanted to check them just to really see kind of where are we, how are we doing, what's the load time. This was the technology stack that we used. So I say we. I didn't use any of this, just to be clear. This is the technology stack that the Nagarro team as well as our internal team used. Some things we thought we would use, like some of the stream processing or Spark, and some we didn't use, and this is sort of the not implemented part. But this was basically the technology stack that we used, so different data sources and so forth. So again, if you want to know how it was done, and certainly the Nagarro team can give you more insight than I'm going to be able to, but this is kind of the architecture overview, if you will. If we go a little bit further, so as I said, we were talking structured, unstructured. How do we gain the potential or leverage the data? Again, this is kind of like a general slide, I would say, but I think Damos said it quite well in his opening, and I think you all know, based on your own personal lives and professional lives, we generate data every day. So you're walking, you got your Fitbits, your iPhones, whatever, capturing all this stuff, and sometimes we know it and sometimes we don't know it, but the data is being captured. So again, this is more how do we take all this data and make use of it somehow. So now we get a little bit more into the organizational stuff. I talked a little bit about this as far as authorization, who had access, what data gets loaded and stuff like that. So we also wanted to make sure that the connectors were working with Azure. We wanted to make sure that the performance, what could we do? And this is also some of the areas where we struggled a little bit. We didn't have the expertise in-house. I think we underestimated what we could do as far as getting data out. We thought we could do it. We struggled. We also did this sort of as an on-top project, so it wasn't planned. We kind of saw it and said, okay, let's go. And then obviously we ran into some resource constraints. So I would say we got there, but probably we didn't get there in the right format. But I'll share a little bit more when we get to the lessons learned. But this kind of a little bit about what we did and how we did it from the organizational side. So I think this is probably where it gets a little bit more into it. So the sponsorship was there, that was clear. It was supported from the senior IT management side. One of the problems we had was I kind of de facto acted as the project manager, which was the wrong approach. So I'll tell you that right now. Not that I can't project manage, but with so many different topics also going on a daily basis, this is one area where we certainly fell down on. And if I had to do it again, I definitely wouldn't have done it. The reason why I did it was because of exactly what I said before about what tool for what purpose. This is working. Why do we need to change it? So I would say don't underestimate the organizational kickback, or as I like to call it, server hugger mentality This is mine, leave it alone, it works, why do you want to change it? I would definitely not underestimate that, and I think going back to the slide on BI or data warehouse and data lake, I think that would also help, at least I hope it would help, to kind of explain why you're doing some of this stuff. It's not to mean that we're not going to get rid of business intelligence, but that's for primarily, end users. We're talking really scientific analysis, trying to figure out where can we see patterns, what can we do different, and you're not going to get that out of a traditional BI tool. So that would be kind of my caution. Make sure you have someone that can really drive it, has the time to drive it, but more importantly, make sure it's clear to everybody why you're doing certain things or why certain things may be replaced, or more importantly, that it probably won't be replaced. You're really talking a different use case. Again, the architect and the SAP, as I said, I think we underestimated some of our internal skills in this area, especially when it came to optimizing these OData services as far as the data loads and stuff like that. So from the infrastructure side, as you saw in the technology stack, we did it primarily with Microsoft products. So obviously you need somebody doing that. This part was not the topic. The developer part was the topic. Partially it was time, but partially it was also a skill set topic. But again, that was part of our finding going into it. We wanted to understand where do we need to change, where do we maybe have the right skills, we don't have the right skills, because if we're moving this way, we wanted to also understand what do we need to do to ramp up for this direction. And then sort of the data quality. This, I would say, was probably our biggest challenge. Even though the data was in different systems, and Nagarro even cautioned that the ingestion of this data, you have to really work on these programs, but you have, I don't know, and I see some people laughing, so they know exactly what I'm talking about here, but it could be simple stuff. You have a semicolon that when you try to ingest it, truncates it to 2 rows of data, whatever. It's a simple example, but I think you all know what I'm talking about. So the data quality, I would say we definitely underestimated. It's in the system, whatever the system is, but when you try to extract it and do something with it, you're going to have some issues with it. So this would be my other major lessons learned. You may think you have good data. I would challenge you and say you probably don't. So that would be another key finding from my side. And again, you can see kind of what was done. So Python scripts were written to cleanse the data and stuff like that. But clearly it was a topic for us. So again, some of the lessons learned, and some of this will be repetitive of what I already said. Again, we had some calculation errors even from the SAP BW side, which hopefully that data was already kind of in an area, but we still noticed issues, especially on data load. And again, some of the data quality issues that I talked about here, special characters and stuff like that. So again, I would say definite word of caution. Don't assume that your data is all clean and ready to go. So in summary with the lessons learned, so what went well? I think this list, and again, I'm not going to read every single item, but I'll paraphrase. I think the Azure setup, all of that stuff from the technical side went very well. The data sources we selected, I think it also gave us a good sample of different data from different areas, so I think that was fine. The data accuracy, I think, was we got to that point, but again, with the data quality, it probably took us a little bit longer than needed to be if we would have had cleaner data to start with. We did have the 2 usable POCs, so we did have dashboards. They calculated out exactly how we did it manual, so all of that part was fine. It was just that, like I said, we had some data quality issues. What could be improved? So as I already talked about, we had some scheduling delays. This was partially on our internal SAP team, but also from my side running the project. That was clear. The division of tasks, I think it was clear, but I think this kind of came back to the timing. So it was a handoff from Nagarro to ANDRITZ. What should it take 2 days? Maybe took 2 weeks and stuff like that. And again, it was primarily because we added this project as an on top. So I would do that definitely differently. We also we used the Power BI desktop, which had a little bit less functionality than the enterprise version. So again, I'll say we were playing, and I don't want this to make it seem like we're just throwing money around, but we really wanted to see and learn from these, but also not to just kind of make something up. So we really took some good examples, and these, if I had to do it again, these would be the things that I would reconsider. So the Power BI, the dashboards were certainly there, and they tied out, so no issue there. And then the last slide here, again, this is something that I came across that I thought was also kind of adapted it a little bit, but I thought this was also kind of interesting to when you think about how do you sell this, and I'm not trying to make you sell this to your organizations, but if you decide to go down this path, I think these are some of the things you need to consider. Why are you doing certain things with certain tools? You're not probably going to replace your existing warehouse and your business intelligence solutions. This is probably going to be complementary. Who's going to do it? Is it your data scientists using one tool and your end users using another tool? So again, I came across it. We use this internally as well to kind of figure out where are we, because as I said, we have SAP BI, we have Celonis for process mining, we have data lake use cases now. So we're also kind of rethinking or really figuring out what is our strategy in each of these areas. And this was a really good example to kind of show us, one, the power, but also two, that we needed to do or think about some things internally in order to be ready for sort of where we're going. So that's the last slide. I think I'm on time, which may be, I have 3 minutes. At least I set a 30-minute timer for myself. So hopefully you also see it that I'm on time. Because I could talk for 3 weeks just, but no, this was the last slide from my side. So I don't know, questions on break or, yeah? Questions now.
Snap.
Hi, my name is Ludwig. I'm from the exchange in Vienna. I was wondering, you were talking about your hackathon or Datathon. What was it made from? Internal people, or did you make an event out of it?
It was an event totally at Nagarro in India. So we came with a use case. We also came with some prize money for the winning teams. We gave them, as I said, it was procurement-based data, and ultimately what we took the procurement thing forward with. I don't remember the exact questions that we asked, but we basically gave them data, and we said, tell us what this data tells you.
What did they find out?
Well, it was exactly some of the stuff. We had the same material that we bought in different parts of the world for different pricing, different delivery times, and then based on that really brought us forward with the procurement thing. So it was also kind of interesting. I would say, and I mean, again, it's not the first time a company has done this, but sometimes when you look at data, you look at it and see it from your side. But I always say, if you want to know the truth, ask a 2-year-old, because a 2-year-old sees it for exactly the way things are. So I would say it's the same on this case. We know the data, or we at least know what the data should tell, and we just gave raw sample of data. I don't remember, maybe one of these guys remember the details, but we gave them data, and they came back with some stuff and said, well, here, you have these materials that you bought 4 times. It wasn't a quantity thing. It was just you used 4 different vendors. You paid 4 different prices. You had 4 different delivery times. And so it was stuff like that they were able, and then we ultimately went further with that. It was 1 weekend, I believe. I think we started on a Friday and they ended on a Sunday.
Yes.
And it's not the first time. I mean, you guys do these.
We're doing this regularly. So the concept is clients give us a challenge, questions around whatever, right? Usually it's a classic hackathon. I should go away from this loudspeaker. That's
yeah, but there's one over there too, so don't go too far.
Oh, so in that case, it was a data-oriented challenge, right? So what we do is we...
That's not mine, I don't think. Maybe it is, sorry. It is mine, I'm done.
hang on. It's a challenge, it's advertised. It is, and everyone at Nagarro around the globe can participate. Usually they form teams about 5 to 7, 8 people. And then they work usually on a weekend from Friday afternoon till Sunday night. And then they are delivering the results, and the jury selects number of finalists. In that case, it was 3, I think. 3. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, that's it. This is the concept. It's a quite, I would say, compared to the number of people participating, the results that we are producing in a short time frame at a comparable, affordable cost point, it's a very nice tool to produce unexpected results, right? So this was the advertising part. I have some, is there any other question?
And by the way, I'm not being paid to be here, so everything I'm telling you, and if you want I'm fully transparent. So everything I tell you, if it was good, I tell you it's good, and if it's bad, I tell you it's bad.
Come on.
I'm not a paid speaker. I was in India, and I stopped in Austria on my way home. So,
is there any other question from the audience? Yes.
No, I mean, so Nagarro's been a development partner for 3-4 years now. I don't know exactly. So it wasn't a question of, do we do it with Nagarro, do we not do it with Nagarro? I can tell you we don't have the skills to do the whole Azure stack and Python and all of that. So that part was clearly Nagarro. But if you're asking, why did we select Nagarro over, say, a different vendor, it was because we already had a working relationship. So we didn't go out and say, okay, there's probably 10 different vendors that can do this. We did it because of the working relationship we already had with Nagarro. But to answer the second part, or at least sort of I broke it into 2, we definitely didn't have the skills internally to do it, or the staff. I mean, as you saw, there was about 90 or so people that were part of the team. So, I mean, I have 500 IT people around the world, but there's no way that we would have had that number of people being able to do that.
What are the next goals, let's say 1 or 2 years?
That's a very good question. I wish I had a good answer for that. As I said, we're seeing more and more from our customers that we have a whole group. It's called APO. It's process optimization. Right now, it's all on-prem. It has to go somewhere. Wherever that is, I don't know if it's AWS, Google, whatever, but the data has to come somewhere. We got to figure out how we get that data out, because that's how we're really going to make value of it. If you're a big pulp and paper customer or whatever, you might have that data single plant, but the real value comes when you get the data from all plants, or even from our side, although this is not part of this, but if you can get the data and it's not a competitive related topic, if we can optimize something to save everybody money or to help the environment or whatever. So it's stuff like that I see where we can go. The internal side of this is really figuring out what tools do we use for what purposes, which is why I pointed out a couple of those slides where I think each of you will probably come to the same realization, and that is, you're going to have people fighting for their solution, their technology stack, their whatever. But you also, I'm a firm believer in you can't do everything with one tool. There's a reason why a screwdriver was invented. There's a reason why a hammer was invented. And yeah, you can probably nail in a screw with a screwdriver. You might be able to take a screw out with a hammer, but is it the right tool for the right job? Probably not. And at least what we're trying to do is figure out, where do we see and where do we position all of these topics. So I don't know if I helped you, but we're using all of this as to chart the course where we're going. We actually took, so some of the internal stuff we did, we actually took what was separate teams, and we've now formed one team that's working across all these disciplines. It doesn't matter whether it's sales reporting, SAP reporting, so all of this will now be one team. I'm not going to say it was a direct byproduct of this, but we're trying to get all these data silos at least under one umbrella, and then figure out what's the tools that we use for the use cases.
I would have two questions out of many that our guests have been putting outside of the board, and I would like to ask them to use Scott. You mentioned 5 success factors, right? One question is given the 3 most important. I would say, which is one of them? Which would, so top down, understand the data, send organization, set the team right, and secure the data quality. What do you think would be the most important, or gave you the biggest headache?
The data quality by far.
Okay,
so by far the data quality. I think you can find the right talent, you can find the right solutions. The data quality by far is going to be anyone's biggest challenge. And we were talking a little bit earlier. I always say we're not a supermarket, and I'm not being that in a negative way, but for the most part, you scale a supermarket based on how many products you carry, what's your square meters, whatever, but it's pretty much the same. If I go to a spar is a spar, and we're an engineering company. One of the things we do well is engineer. And when you engineer, although we try to standardize on parts and materials and whatever, it's not always the case. So, and we also have equipment that's been running for a very long time. So to go backwards and try to standardize that is also not always possible. So that's a huge challenge, and with that challenge becomes a mass amount of data that's not standardized. So by far, that's our biggest challenge.
Thank you. And the second question, this is a little bit more generic, and before we answer it theoretically, the question was, what do you see as the future of the data warehouse? Now, I would like to try to clarify, do you really mean data warehouse, the classical one, in comparison to data lake, or do you mean data lake in general? Whoever asked this question, please. Well, let's try to understand it. How about the future of the data warehouse per se? So what would you do with your data warehouses in 5 years?
At least from my point of view, I don't see it changing. I think the use cases are a little bit different. Will they start getting a little bit closer? Maybe, but right now I don't see either one going away. So I think you have to look at what's the thing. We're not going to employ a bunch of data scientists going deep into data, so somehow you're going to have to bring that data to some state of normalization and then give it to somebody in your sales group, in your engineering group, wherever, that can then at least make use of some level of structure that you've given them that you may not know, say from the IT side, but they can look at it and develop a pattern and say, hey, this customer was always ordering this amount each quarter, and all of a sudden, I don't see that sort of stuff coming out of a data lake and really taking a more data scientist approach to it. At least that's my take on it. But
I will ask the same question later on, Anurag, in a few hours. So
he's probably more qualified to answer that question, by the way.
Well, maybe theoretical or a vision in the future. You say you will need your relational database-based data warehouse, right, for the next years.
At least from my side, I see it, but I also say we're kind of like a big battleship. We don't turn too fast, so we're pretty steady, but we need quite a few tugboats to get us sometimes moving. So maybe other companies may not, but at least for ANDRITZ and kind of where we are, I would see it staying.
Okay. Thank you very much. Please give Scott a hand. Thank you. Yes.